Welcome everyone to our PGVIS paper presentation today on the title of Pathways from Past to Present. And our first presenter is Ajahn Siravith Kongbandalsuk, my colleague from Princess Galyani Vadhana Institute of Music, on the topic of transformation of brass resonators, programming sonic modulation of trombone through Khong Wong Yai's tuning system. เชิญครับอาจารย์
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining the presentation. As you hear Ajahn Puntwitt say about my topic is transformation of brass resonator. Let me explain about the reason why I choose this topic, and the name of this topic is this. Let me begin with the quotation from one of the most influential Thai musician who was involved in the Western music in Thailand since long time ago, Prajen Duriyam. His quotation is, under no circumstance can Western instrument be mixed up with the Siamese, which is the old name of the Thailand, since the scale steps of the two systems of music are different. First time when I saw this quotation, I have a question to, is it true or is it not? I asked myself, is it true? Which aspect which he means? And if it not, is there a possibility to mix up together? And I find out that from my opinion, I think the main point is the tuning system, which make these two music scene so different. Okay, to summarize about the tuning system of Thai music and Western music briefly to see the difference, we can summarize that Western music usually construct from the 12 different tones, while Thai music has only 7 tones. Of course, the amount of different note in one octave is different, so the distance between each note has to be different. So I think this one is the main aspect that mentioned about the scale step that make these two music, Thai music and Western music, is completely different. So the main idea of this research is going to explore about, is it possible to use the tuning system of Thai music and perform it as similar as possible with the Western instrument. The Western instrument I choose this time is trombone, and the Thai instrument that I use as a model or guideline is the Khong Wong Yai. Khong Wong Yai is the Thai instrument that has a fixed pitch. The pitch will be adjusted by adding a wax under the bronze to make a sound lower or higher. As you can hear the sample, I choose the only 7 tones of Khong Wong Yai, starting from the lowest and continue to the 7th one. The lowest is on the left. And then the second one. The third one. The fourth. 4th bronze. The 5th bronze. The 6th bronze. The 7th 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 bronze. The 7 fifth one. After I got the sound sample of Khong, I analyzed this pitch and calculate it into the number of frequency as you can see in this table. I use the spectroid application to analyze the frequency of each Khong note and then compare to the note reference in the eco-temperament system. And I find out that each note of Khong is not exactly related to the pitch reference in the eco-temperament, but they have the adjustment in very interestingly. For example, like if you start from the lowest one of Khong, the third note, when compared to the eco-temperament, the pitch of Khong is extremely low from the F4, like and if we calculate into cents, you will find out that it's extremely low from the note reference. Also, the 7-1, which is compared is close to the note C5, also extremely low. When you got the frequency of Khong and you draw into the graph, you can see the distance between the third one and the 7-1, which extremely large, the gap between these two. And you can see that the slope of Khong pitch has not so inclination, just flat, increasing flat line. When we receive the information about pitch frequency of Khong, I decide to matching each two to hear the interval and the resonance between each two notes of Khong. I use the comparison with a Western tuning system that is very common and we used to in the Western music world is just intonation and equal temperament. The difference between equal temperament and just intonation is the distance of ratio or distance of two notes. For example, like the major third in equal temperament, the distance is 400 cents and the ratio is 1.259. However, in the just intonation, the ratio is slightly different from equal temperament. The two pitch of Khong is when you plot the graph together with equal temperament and just intonation, you will get the result. I get the result like this, and you can see the important thing is the distance between the first and the second note of each system. This is a first pitch and second pitch of Khong compared with the major second interval in both equal temperament and just intonation, and you will find that with the Khong pitch, the inclination is less than the equal temperament and just intonation system, which means that sounds should not be same like a major second interval. And the next one is the first pitch and third pitch of Khong. It could compare like a major third interval. However, the inclination is even low, even less than the previous interval before. The fourth one, the fourth pitch and the first pitch and the fourth pitch of Khong. When you look at the graph compared to the perfect fourth interval, you will see that it's almost parallel. So it sounds not so different from the perfect fourth interval. Also with the perfect fifth interval, when compare the first pitch and fifth pitch of Khong, the inclination of Khong pitch graph isn't too different from equal temperament and just intonation. Also the sixth interval. And the seventh interval, as you can see, when you compare the first pitch and seventh pitch of Khong, the inclination of Khong graph is higher than the -7 interval. But if you look at the first table, I mentioned that the frequency of 7 note of Khong is close to the C5, which means when compared to D flat 4, it should be major 7 interval. However, when you compare the distance between first and 7 note, the sounds and the distance is more similar to the -7 more than major 7 as it should be if you look at this table. The interesting of this interval is what I found is, especially when you look at the third interval, the first pitch of Khong and the third pitch of Khong. If you take a look at only frequency, you will see that it sounds like the pitch, every pitch is close to the D flat major scale. But when you take the two pitch and you look at the distance of these two notes doesn't show that it's more likely into the minor third more than major third. Also the 7 interval, the sounds, when you look at the distance and calculate the distance is likely to be -7 more than the major 7 instead of the frequency that I mentioned before. So I would like you to hear the exploration of how I perform this Khong pitch on trombone. And please pay attention on the third one and the seventh one. Of course, the Thai music tradition or Thai music instrument, the important thing is each Thai music instrument or Thai music ensemble has an individual tuning system, or it could say that it's very unique. With this unique, it is very enhancing me to explore about how can we adapt the Western music into Eastern tuning system like this. Of course, you cannot say that this model can use with any Thai instrument, but this process can use for a model to merge the Western instrument together with the, for example, the fixed pitch instrument like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you ครับอาจารย์ศิรวิทย์ If the audience have any questions, please put the comments in the QA. And for me, I would like to ask Ajahn Siravith that from what you have found, can this apply to another Thai instruments or even another Western instruments?
For Ajahn Puntwitt question, let me answer the second question about the Western. The reason why I choose trombone, because the trombone is a brass instrument and it has the trombone change note with the sliding the tube and extend or shorten the tube to get to change the pitch.
Yes.
Differently from trumpet or French horn that it has a wow. Of course, it can change the tube, but the trombone can adjust freely more than other brass instrument. But with this advantage, it also has a disadvantage, because when you compare with piano or other Western instrument, they can play this kind of pitch more precisely and more instantly than trombone. But for the experimental process, I prefer to use the trombone because it can adjust and you can train your ear to play the same frequency as close as possible.
Right. And how about strings?
The reason why I choose Khong Wong Yai, as I say, because the Khong Wong Yai is the fixed pitch instrument. The pitch is always fixed with the ensemble normally, but when you look at the other instrument like a Thai string instrument, nowadays you can see that Thai string instrument, for example, saw, mostly they can adjust pitch to Western to make the process of Westernization to play the pitch exactly with the Western tuning system.
We have a question from our attendant. It says, how do you wish to apply this into your performance in the future?
This is very challenging question because with this process, I found that Western instrument, of course, it has the different structure, it has the different harmonic series partial. I found that if you compare Khong Wong Yai and trombone, I found that trombone has more flexibility to adjust to Khong Wong Yai more than adjust the Khong Wong Yai to the trombone. And I found that with this freely, you can develop you can combine these two instruments together. But if you pay attention to the frequency or pitch or intonation, this process could make it more delicate to make a sound that comes together or sonority is harmoniously more. But you have to pay attention about the spectrum as well, because the Khong and trombone has the different harmonic series. Khong has trombone has only one harmonic series from one note, but Khong has many harmonic series in only one note. So it could be a new composition, or it could be combination about to making the new sonority.
All right, thank you. The other questions is that I would like to ask how you feel in terms of quality of each interval tune in this system. For example, a perfect fifth. Does it sound more or less in tune than using a just intonation, in your opinion?
From my opinion, as I mentioned in the graph, in the graph about the interval, about the inclination of each system, the sound of the perfect fifth, I found that isn't different too much from the perfect fifth interval. Let's say that this interval is sound doesn't different from the just intonation or equal temperament.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Kun Prom Pak Jaru Pongpak Jaru Pakon. And thank you for the presentation, Ajahn Siravith Kongbandalsuk. Do you have? We have another question. Yeah, another question from the audience is that, have you ever thought of the possibility to collaborate with composers in the future based on this research?
Honestly, yes. I would like to make it into a composition, but the beginning, I suggest that you have to explore every possibility from these two instruments first. That's why the reason I explore from the lowest pitch of Khong, which when you look at the scale pattern or of Thai music, the lowest one is not the beginning system of the scale. But the reason is I would like to explore the possibility as much as possible. Then it can give me more possible option to make a composition.
Interesting. And I'll look forward to the composition. Thank you so much, Ajahn.
Thank you very much.
We'll be going to the next presenter. May I present Dr. Marie Jocelyn Yu Marfil? Is she here with us?
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon.
She's a professor at University of Philippines College of Music, and she's going to present to us the topic of my works as inspired by Mansaka culture. Please enjoy.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizer for giving me this opportunity to present my paper. So the title of my paper is My Work as Inspired by the Mansaka Culture. In my paper, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. My paper presents an insight of how my research in the past could or could have not made sense in the present times of the pandemic crisis. Here I ask, what are the instances in the pre-research stage that brought me to my research group and music composition? And how is the post-production, referring to the aftermath of producing my outputs, ushered in the realization of fieldwork and technology divide? Next slide, please. In 2014, I was out of the country as PhD student at the University of Hawaii. In my intention of conducting my field research on the Mansaka, an indigenous group of people in Davao, the southern part of the Philippines, I researched online and came across the name Dato Rudy Unlos, the chieftain of the Mansaka at that time. Through email and some connections with the Department of Education in Davao City, an appointment was made. I found out later that remote communication can bring uncertainties. When I arrived in Tagum, Dato Unlos was not aware of my visit. Personal communication is important among indigenous communities, aside from their minimum access to online tools. With the mediation of the mayor of Tagum, I was formally introduced to the Office of the Indigenous People in Tagum City Hall, and there I met Dato Unlos again, and this time he allowed my entry in their community for research. I would like to make clear that my perspective is coming from the culture of an outsider. In my childhood years, however, our family moved to Mako, Compostela Valley, which is 8 miles away from Tagum City, where the Mansaka live. I may be an outsider, but because of my experience with the Mansaka, their music is not new to me. Thus, I proceed to explain about this people and later will share my insights. Next slide, please. So this is the acceptance ritual. So before I can start my research, so they give this to me as part of their protocol. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the actual recording and interviews to all the cultural masters. And yeah, they performed, I recorded their pieces, their even dances. Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. So yeah, we had also I had a chance of nighting with them. And if you see this part, this is actually my last day there. And I felt really that welcome because if this is Dato Unlos, that's in their house. And you know, that wine, that's really special. He made that, and that's for special guests. So I'm thankful for that. Next slide, please. Yeah, so it so happened when I was there, they had this oath-taking ceremony wherein after 80 years of that fighting for their voice, to the government. So this was granted. Okay, next slide, please. Mansaka music has specific social functions in their culture and tradition. The binarit is the music for courtship, while barabay is for entertainment, and sakay-sakay is used for all types of ceremonies and rituals. Dancing has always been a part of every ceremony and ritual. Next slide. Some example of the Mansaka ceremonies and rituals are piyagsawitan, wedding ceremony, healing ritual, ritual to become a bagani, and acceptance ritual. Next slide, please. Many of the Mansaka music and performance practices are manifested in other ethnic groups of the Philippines and other Asian countries. After listening to and transcribing some of the Mansaka music, my findings became the basis of my composition. This includes chanting, particularly in performing dawat, ornamentation such as the grace notes and glissando of the melodic lines, both in vocal and instrumental performance, playing a repetitive single pitch in the introduction of the piece, and playing on the different parts of the percussion instruments by one or more performers. Next slide. In Padayag, instead of just using the Western orchestra, I integrate Filipino indigenous instruments. I want to experiment with what happens to my music when I add these instruments. I also assimilate performance practices, styles, and musical gestures of Mansaka music into my own musical style. My composition is a 5-movement orchestral work inspired by the Mansaka life cycle, birth, courtship, wedding and harvest, and death, afterlife, and birth and dance. Next slide. The following are the 5 movements with their specific title, each reflecting one of the life events listed above. Isukaturugda, so that's the birth. Binarit, courtship. Piyagsawitan, wedding and harvest. Tawat, death, the life. And Isukaturugda and barabay, birth and death. So these are the 5 movements of my piece. Next slide. I employ standard Western orchestra with Philippine indigenous instruments such as kulintang. Okay, next, please. Gimbal. Next. Gandingan. Agong. Next, please. And bamboo chimes. The instrument varies from movement to movement depending on the presentation of each event. Next slide. The title of my composition is Padayag, meaning expression, because the piece is meant to express the experiences I have had with the Mansaka people, their music, and their culture. This afternoon, I am going to present the 3rd movement of the piece entitled Piyagsawitan, however, arranged for symphony orchestra. Piyagsawitan is a harvest ceremony comprising a sequence of 4 Mansaka dances, namely rice planting, harvesting, pounding, and cooking. Next slide. After this sequence, the entire Mansaka community gathers for a 3-day feast to celebrate Thanksgiving and prayer for the good harvest. This gathering can be likened to a Mansaka wedding celebration, which shows abundance through the bountiful food prepared on the table. The wedding celebration lasts for months, however, rather than days. The similarities of this ceremony inspired me in writing the 3rd movement, which depicts the next stage of the life cycle, which is marriage. Planting, besides utilizing the Piyagsawitan rhythmic motive, the entire section features the element of drone and low register. This gives a notion of closeness to the land portrayed in the act of planting. So I have a video clip here. Next slide, please. The next part of, or the next section of the piece is Harvesting, depicts the active and enthusiastic involvement of the people in harvesting. The ostinado of the Sayaw Sangbagani rhythmic motive in the string portrays their involvement through the variation of a 4/16th note figure. In addition, the lyrical melodies in horn and first violins evoke the pleasant environment of the field. Sayaw Sangbagani, so music is played during the ritual to become a bagani or a warrior dance. Next slide, please. Sorry, bagani, sorry, is a warrior. Yeah, that's the term. A clip of the Sayaw Sangbagani. So let's watch it. Next slide, please.
Sayaw Sangbagani, war music.
War dance.
War dance.
The next section of the piece is pounding. So it is the most percussive section in the movement. I utilized the various timbres of the percussion instruments to characterize the essence of pounding. And then the next part is cooking. Cooking portrays the interaction of the Mansaka while preparing the wedding feast. Musically, the interlocking of the different sections of the orchestra conveys this interaction. Whereas the previous sections featured simpler, slower rhythms, this section is filled with ascending and descending groups of quintuplets, often played in high registers. The greater density of notes and faster rhythms creates a more tense environment, as do the strings tremulous and glissandos. In the last part of the piece, or of this movement, is thanksgiving and prayer. The thanksgiving and prayer introduces a more reflective mood created by Sayaw Sangbagani's slow and augmented rhythm. The choral-like orchestration of a lyrical melody near the end of the piece adds to this mood. The strong contrast of this section from the rest of the movement is further emphasized by its softer dynamics, slower tempos, the strings harmonics, and the muted colors in the brasses. Above all this, the fragmented Sayaw Sangbagani melody intertwines with the new lyrical melody to create a more contemplative atmosphere. So the next clip, next slide please. That's the, I would say, the output. So this is the Piagsalutan. Okay, so that's my first piece. Now the second piece, next slide please, is And the Race Began for String Quartet. It is inspired by a myth about the Mansaka people competing or racing with beings from the outside world as tall and as huge as giants. The late Dato Unlus mentioned that during this race, their ancestors' opponents would throw the ball as far as 1 mile, and their ancestors would run as fast as they could to catch the ball. And so one hears fast passages with extreme dynamics and register in this piece, such that one experienced the idea of chasing and competition in this game. Okay, so for my final video clip, so this is And the Race Began. For my conclusion, I revisited my research question, which I raised earlier in this paper. Next slide. How is the post-production ushered in the realization of the fieldwork and technology divide? Given my experiences in the email communication, finding the communication gap between my network and the community leader, and having to go through the government process of permission, I realized that perhaps if my field research happened at this time of pandemic, I will be facing more challenges. Cultural differences may or may not accommodate research. In my case, it was a rough road. However, on a positive note, writing pieces as inspired by a living culture such as the Mansaka has been a long-time dream in my compositional writing career. I could have just looked for online resources and perhaps transcribed their music, but I opted to go to their community to know them personally and experience their culture. The risk of being rejected and the tedious bureaucratic process with the government and political leaders were all a challenge. But in the end, the divide became a point of transcendence. Visiting them personally became an enriching experience as I was able to gather much more information than I expected, and my output was celebrated in different local and international festival themes. For the community, I provided a copy of my work years ago. but there was no personal feedback yet. At this time of pandemic, it is another challenge to bridge the gap of time and visit. But when all these are lifted, it is worth to share with them the work that I made as inspired by their wealth of knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marie. Thank you so much for the presentation and the wonderful music. If the audience have questions, please let me know and I'll ask for you. For now, I have some questions for you, Dr. Marie. What challenges do you have when you're doing some field works?
My works. Well, first of all, it's more of the planning, yeah, like the instrumentation. Like how will I start, or what would be my concept with all I've gathered during my research? So that's one thing. And then another one is combining the Western and the indigenous instruments. But then to me, I would like to experiment new sound world.
And also the philosophy of life cycle. How do you manage to bring the Mansaka philosophy into music?
Well, the idea of that life cycle is my idea, right? But then I just base that because of this music I gathered from them. So basically, let's say the birth is based also from that piece, which is, example, lullaby. So it's more of sleeping the child. So all those rhythmic materials, or for some movement, I even gathered pitch materials and incorporated that to my music.
Right. And the second piece, and the race began. This is the myth from Mansaka people. Is this their folklore?
Yeah, I believe it's a folklore. Yeah. Yeah, but sometimes, you know, indigenous people, they have different perspective. So, and I respected that. So basically, I just look at what is the story all about, and try to translate it, the nature of that story to my piece.
Have you ever bring your music back to Mansaka people to listen?
Not yet, because I'm having a hard time communicating with them. But I've sent scores to them. But yeah, like what I've said in my conclusion, until now, I haven't heard from them. And I don't know also if, well, I don't think so, if they can appreciate musical scores, yeah. But I hope one day, yeah, if I'd be given opportunity.
If you
Sure.
ever have a chance to show them the performance of your music, I think it'd be quite interesting what they think of your music.
Right, yeah, right, definitely.
Thank you so much for the answer, and I think we have some questions. It says, thank you for your interesting presentation. We all know that the art of music of the Philippines has a long history of incorporating indigenous traditional music elements. In that context, how would you consider your compositional approach unique or different from other Filipino composers?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Like what I've said in my introduction, this has been my dream, yeah, because I was inspired when I was back in college. It was the piece of Dr. Santos actually that inspired me. So I was thinking, since I grew up in the southern part, which is Davao, like, because I've been I was just ignoring their pieces or music. I mean, when I was young, okay, we sang their music, we danced their music, but I never realized it's a rich music that I can use it for my music. And when I got to college, it was a dream that maybe one day, if I have my PhD, that would be my dissertation. So how is it different? Like what I've said, it's really exploring, yeah, the combination of sounds. So I want to use their material. I would say if you're asking difference from the other instruments, the idea of getting materials, having that as inspiration, I think a lot of composers have been doing that in our country since we have different groups of indigenous people. So that has always been an inspiration. And yeah, to me, basically, it's me. This is me, and combining it with my musical style and whatever I gathered from them. So if you're asking for that uniqueness.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Marie.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope we hear another music from you next year. And for our paper presenter is one of our bright students, Princess Galyani Vadhana, Institute of Music. May I present to you Supamongkol. What he will present in the topic of chamber music in the 21st century, adapting classical music to the modern world.
As Ajahn Puntwitt mentioned, I am a fourth-year student at PGVIM.
Can you go a little bit louder? It's too soft.
Is it okay? Hello?
Yes.
Hello. Okay.
Okay.
As a music student, I have already been prepared to create a great creative performance for each concert. For many people, music might be a part-time or something on the side, but for me, it is a job. I devote 6 to 8 hours a day for practicing, learning the history of classical music and attempting to analyze it. A few years ago, I went to a concert with my father. I thought it would be exciting to show him how much we, as music students, sacrifice everything for the concert. At the conclusion of the concert, I asked my father if he was attracted. To my disappointment, he said he did not appreciate it and that he did not get it. He asked me why anyone should spend 1 to 2 hours driving to a concert instead later than buying a good pair of earpiece. Many years later, I attended a classical music concert continuously and began to understand my father's word. I realized that generally the format of most classical music concerts today rely too heavily on the format in the past, which could be a contributing factor in making classical music seem boring and bland for many people. I personally find most forms of art enjoyable and valuable in their own way ever since I was young, very young. But lately, I have been enjoying concerts less and less as I realized that in Thailand, society classical music is not exactly popular yet, and the reason for that stem from general audience lacks of proper understanding of gen. So in response to this realization, I decided to investigate the effect of classical music experience on both musician and non-musician to explore how this issue could be addressed. As a part of this project, I did an interview with one group of musicians and one group of non-musicians to ask them their thought on classical music. Each of them was asked the same set of questions separately. One of the question asked was, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when the word classical music is mentioned? So high caste society was the most popular answer. I found that one of the reasons for this answer was because people feel that classical music is not relevant to them. And to clarify this answer, I think it is important to understand that in Thailand, there are differences in the perception of classical music between individuals who come from a middle class family and those who come from a lower middle class family. According to my interview of the research participant, individuals from middle class household feel that since childhood playing an instrument and listening to classical music were normal activity to them for them. And getting a lesson to study classical music was possible because they could count on their parents' support. In contrast, many parents from the lower middle class family view music as an unstable profession. Some of these parents will even try to stop their children from playing an instrument and force them to read a lot of books from school instead. Moreover, information from a study of Thailand's social inequality in the 21st century regarding the population and poverty in Thailand show that most people in Thailand are living in a lower middle class culture. This is why we are able to see that many people in Thailand are not familiar with classical music. Another answer that many people also mentioned as their first response to classical music was sleep-inducing or soothing. Some of the research participants in musician group said that people may feel this way because the music is relaxing. But in contrast, the research participant in non-musician group who answer in this way described that when they attend a classical music concert, it seemed like they could only sit still in noiseless contemplation while the music was being played with no clapping or singing along. As a result, they feel exhausted and drowsy very quickly. This is quite different from pop music performance, in which most of the audience member know the song beforehand and enjoy singing along with the artist during the concert. So this way helps them feel that they are having a core interaction with music. And the third one, in Thailand, classical music concerts are usually performed in a concert hall with a big orchestra. This could be a reason why 12% of the people that I interviewed thought of orchestra when hearing the word classical music. And attending a concert hall requires individuals to dress formally, considering that most people in Thailand are not able to afford evening attire. This convention etiquette can be like a burden to general public. Okay, as a part of my research, I also conduct a small experience with non-musicians. And according to COVID-19 situation, participants join a video conference call during which they give a live commentary of 3 selected classical music recording. They could talk about their feeling, general thought, what they would love to see for the future classical music concert. At the result of this experiment, it showed that most of the participants feel disengaged in large-scale classical music concert taking place in the concert hall and requiring formal attire. whereas concerts of a smaller scale in which the participant could feel a closer connection with the musician were more appearing. After gathering these last points from musician and non-musician in Thailand, I decided to take a look at how chamber music performance in today's context in both Thailand and abroad are addressing many of the problems that traditional classical music concert are facing in this century. And I also investigated the purpose behind various performances to discover the key element of creating successful chamber music concert in the future that can hopefully help audience in Thailand get closer to classical music. Since the Renaissance period in Western music history, chamber music was intended to perform in a small space in order to make music in a smaller setting. So this then is able to provide opportunity for experimentation and innovation. Composer like Carl Debussy, for example, completely reconstitute the traditional trio for piano, violin, cello with the one that consists of flute, viola, and harp. So chamber ensemble can be used as a testing ground for progressive idea and novel sonorities. Whereas symphonic or orchestral music must be accessible to a large group of people and therefore cannot stray too far from audience expectation. Smaller chamber ensemble usually have less obligation to fill large concert hall, and so experimentation in music can be investigated and extended with music less leak. Yeah. Sample music can also be used to solve many social issues surrounding classical music performance culture. For example, in Thailand, there are problems with taking children to classical music concert because most students cannot sit still, keep quiet, and listen in silence for long periods of time. So in classical music performance, they are present in potentially austere environment with a serious group of professional musicians, intimidating conductor, and serious audience. So in this situation, there is no call for involvement from children. Ori Sharham's Israel-born American pianist. She found a way to engage young children in the classical music concert setting with her concert series Ori Sharham Backyard, and formerly Baby God Bach. In her interactive concert, she introduced children to musical instruments, make an appropriate presentation of musical concept, and give concert performance that promote listening skill with high degree of audience participation. For me, I think it is quite important to introduce classical music to children and also young people, as it will remain with them for the rest of their life. Whereas it might be more difficult to change and adopt perspective on classical music. So a good entryway is to create good memories of music from childhood. Sam Bokin, a classical musician based in Washington, D.C. area and CEO of Group Muse, he has been working to bring people to classical music by presenting it outside the concert hall and bringing it to their home. At this point, I think we can see that group music not only bring people to classical music, but also present a new face of classical music by allowing activities such as drinking, eating, as well as encouraging more audience participation, interaction, such as cheering, dancing, and conversation. Group music is both looking to the original surround concert tradition of classical music, and also modernizing the chamber music environment to a more relaxed and casual atmosphere to take concert feel more accessible to the audience. In a more interactive approach, the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center in New York, USA, hosts a lecture series called Inside Chamber Music with Bruce Adolph. In his episode about Debussy Sonata for flute, viola, and harp, Bruce delved into an explanation of the piece with a lot of demonstration in addition to speak. He explained his idea step by step by playing example on the piano, and that helping his audience to clearly understand his points. Bruce Adolph explained his topic formally but covered it with a lot of joke. This gives us a glimpse of the power of the speaking. When it done well, can fill the listener with many new ideas to take home in addition to the performance, giving fresh perspective to the audience and helping people to understand and enjoy classical music easily. The Tiny Desk concert series frequency feature artists and small ensemble of various genres of music and put the recording on video and NPR music websites. The Tiny Desk concert I watched was performance by Dynasty Quartet, a chamber ensemble who approach I found interesting. They describe themselves as simply your friendly neighborhood string quartet with above average amounts of breath. They emphasize the importance of friendship and pleasure in music making in their philosophy. They are also notable for being flexible with the genre of their music, ranging from classical, pop, and contemporary. For the Tiny Desk concert, they choose to play folk music, with friendliness being one of their core values. This variety in the genre of their performance potentially gives them a broader audience base. I watched an interdisciplinary performance by Lady Moon and the Erik at the Present Lounge, which, like the Tiny Desk concert, put the artist in an intermediate space. In this performance, they not only play music, but they also work with visual art such as painting, video, and costume that help them to express their theme. This one, I think, this is one of the best way to bring people to music. It is not always necessary for performers to talk to their audience or try to explain their concept in words. If the performance is created with the consideration of the audience experiment already in mind. The home concert I attended was a duet concert by Professor Hen Kim and Professor Tanaporn. For the introduction of this concert, they spoke to their audience to give background information of the piece on their program with their own interpretation of the composer ideas. They also give their audience various questions, and this help the audience to have a chance to talk with the artist. The audience was invited to share their idea and be in discussion with the artist at the concert. But I think when they start playing the instrument, I feel that the musician and the audience has been separated into different dimensions. I try to make eye contact with both of them, and it works sometimes, but I feel that they were mostly playing music for each author, not for audience. So I think in order to create a performance that engages the audience performer need to focus on their work and their audience at the same time, so that they will be able to give a glimpse, give a convincing performance or presentation from beginning to end. All of these concerts have their own unique purpose, and many of their ideas can be used to enhance the classical music concert scene in Thailand. I have created a table to illustrate what I think are the elements that are important for making successful chamber music concert. I mark a star for each element that was shown in a concert or concert series that I explored. I used 1/2 elements that were somewhat presented in the concert but not clearly expressed. Elements that will not be expressed are decided with dash. So before attending a concert, most people expect the performance to have quality. So that is why it is the first step in creating a successful concert. Accessibility. Consider the effect made to help people feel close to the music, such as by having a more casual or relaxed discourse and or environment, as well as sharing their performance via streaming or visualizing. So the third one, participation, is when musicians lead their audience to engage with music, allowing the audience to be a part of their performance. And conversation refer to when people in a musician group exchange or explain their idea to people in another group, the audience, in their concert. This must be more than just a few words in greeting. So the next one, education, is when musicians describe what they are going to do or why they are doing it. They are doing things in this way. This kind of performance, I think learning and teaching method are also involved. Conservation is the performance that keeps its own character. For example, classical music being played in its original form without any alteration, even if the presentation is modern. Trend is when musicians or organizers understand the needs of the audience in current time and adapt their performance to suit them. Surprise is when musicians do something that many people do not expect them to do in their concerts, such as playing the happy birthday song for one of the audience members, or bringing someone from the audience to the stage and let them do something interesting. Interdisciplinary element is when musicians work with the author art, such as dancing, storytelling, painting, or visual. According to this table, we can see that accessibility, quality, and conservation seem to be priority for every group in this research. It means that every group emphasizes ways that help their audience feel closer to music and took care of the quality of their performance while still working with traditional instrument and pitch. These things were followed by conversation, education, and trend. We can see that conversation is also one of the popular choice to explain music to people, but not every group used it. For example, Lady Moon and the Erik choose to use visual to help people understand their theme instead. I can confidently say that much of the music presented or performed in this event would not be accessible to general audience without some contextualization or background knowledge. So many musicians decided to give more information and educate their audience for efficient listening. Participation, surprise, and interdisciplinary elements were less used, but are also varied options for making a successful concert. Many of these ideas from various performances can be used as a solution for some of the problems that classical music is facing in Thailand. As I mentioned before, most people in Thailand think that classical music is a high-caste society event, and it makes them feel uncomfortable. To add this problem, we can see that we can look to the approach of concert and artists such as group muse, Dynasty Quartet, and the duet by Professor Hen Kim and Professor Tanaporn. For ideas on creating concert that makes people feel comfortable, feel more relaxed, and make classical music feel more friendly. Considering holding the event in a familiar environment such as a home and letting the audience feel free to wear anything as they please without fear of being judged by their attire. Most of these groups also use some of the conversation to help audience get closer with their to help artists get closer with their audience. The example of Ori Shaham and Bruce Adolph show that music can be explained to people in an easier way, even if they have no previous musical training, so that they would be able to understand it and enjoying it. For my research interview, many people also said that classical music is a sleepy music because most classical music concert in Thailand require people to sit still and listen in silence. Orisha Ham Backyard and group music show ways to engage audience with interactive activity. So that audience can follow it and enjoy the music from beginning to end. Whereas in traditional classical music concert, people have to follow certain rules such as withholding approach between movement. In backyard and group music concert, clapping, cheering, and dancing are accepted at all the times during the event. This activity can help audience feel more active and engaged and hopefully more awake. And the orchestra that play old music was another response I got from my research interview. But with chamber music performance, the small size of the ensemble allow musicians to create their performance in a different way. The Dynasty Quartet and Lady Moon and the Erik choose to play not only classical music, but also include other style in their performance in order to tailor their performance to their audience needs based on the context and environment of their performance. All of these concerts working with different conditions and having different intention, challenging the performer to create a satisfying performance for their audience. Although the classical music scene in Thailand faces many hurdles, borrowing from this idea can help provide solution for the issue discussed and make classical music more interesting for Thai audience. Exploring this approach can potentially change the whole picture of classical music concert to be something new and something unexpected. Yes.
Thank you. What an interesting idea. I start to think that I may put food and beverage in front of my recital soon after this. And Supamongkol,
Yes.
how would you like to adapt this research to your performance? Do you plan to do?
I really would like to create performance that engage many people, especially my father. So I can, let's say, I can borrow some of this element to use it in my performance in the future.
Which one would you use? The
Food and drink, of course.
and the backyard one?
Yeah, if I have to create a concert for children, that is an interesting idea as well.
Maybe it's not necessary for children only. It can be educational for adults or general audience too, in my opinion.
But if is it my father, he will say something like, what am I doing here in this concert, and why I need to dance with them? I just want to sit and listen to music, something like that.
Maybe a good alcohol beverage would help your father.
Yes.
Okay. The question from the audience says, ขอบคุณนะครับสำหรับ presentation. I understand what you were saying about inspiring audiences and the benefits of classical music in children. Although your presentation is about classical music, I would like to know your thoughts if the same way of thinking is applicable also in Thai traditional music. Can Thai traditional music also do all these things you say classical music can? Also, are you seeing any parallelism with the decline of the middle class interest in musical music and Thai traditional music?
I think we are working with the performance, but I think is it not that necessary for realizing about the kind of music. Thai music or let's say another kind of music can be also used with this idea as well. Yes. Sorry, the question is quite too long. I can't remember all of that, but
okay, let me
this is the point.
Repeat one more time. Are you seeing any parallelism with the decline of the middle class interest in classical music and Thai traditional music?
Can you translate that question for me?
คือว่าอย่างอิงสามารถเห็นว่าการที่คนอะไรนะคน middle class อะเนาะคนชั้นกลางเขาเริ่มไม่ค่อยสนใจ classical music เนี่ยยิ่งเห็นว่ามันเป็นไปเหมือนกันไหมกับดนตรีไทยเป็นไปทางเดียวกันหรือเปล่า
I think it is a matter of taste for this question, but the key education is also the lesson that why middle class culture, people in middle class culture feel that classical music is boring. It's boring. Yeah.
ขอบคุณครับอิง Thank you for the presentation.
Yes.
For our next presenter, may I present to you Professor Tanaporn Rajatanavin from University of North Texas on the topic of the emergence of the subconscious in Erik Satie's Parade, the search for surrealism in sound.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much, the Princess Galyani Institute of Music, for this opportunity for me to present today. This is actually my graduate project for my Master of Arts degree in musicology. But right now, I'm actually I just joined the faculty at the Frisco School of Music and Performing Arts in Texas, USA. So the emergence of the subconscious in Erik Satie's Parade, the search for surrealism in sound. This surrealist ballet Parade was the result of collaboration by a group of modernists during World War I. The French novelist Marcel Proust viewed this work as, quote, nourishment in the age of famine, end quote, due not only to its humorous and lighthearted nature, but also to its combination of the spontaneity of street performances and the seriousness of the concert hall. Most who attended the premiere at the Théâtre du Châtelet in 1917, however, do not seem to agree with this positive judgment. Despite the elite artistic status of its creators, at the time of its premiere, Parade inspired controversy. Debates focuses especially on the absurd elements within this ballet. My paper investigates possible connections between Satie musics and the later Surrealist movement. These connections date to the time of the premiere. Guillaume Apollinaire, the French poet, art critic, and playwright, described Parade after attending the rehearsal of this ballet in the lengthy program note as surrealist. Satie had no plan to be a part of the surrealist movement, which later evolved tremendously and left a long-lasting legacy. Yet there are ways of connecting Satie's music to surrealism. This paper explores Parade as a case study that seeks to understand and define surrealism in music. I do so through the idea of self-exploration, a well-established interpretive approach in the history of surrealism in the visual arts. Satie's music, in conjunction with the work of his collaborators, was a crucial part of the associative, dreamlike experience created by this ballet. The ideas of dreaming and the subconscious play significant roles in the realm of surrealist literature and visual arts, in part because the ideology of surrealism was adapted from Freud's approach to psychoanalysis. Further, my paper seeks to disrupt the tendency to adhere to disciplinary divisions, aiming instead to define the idea of surrealism in sound by focusing on the psychological implications of the music in context, and prove that music was part of the surrealist movement from the very beginning. This ballet was written by John Cocteau. Parade presents the simple story of street performers and their manager tirelessly trying to lure an audience into seeing the spectacle that will happen on the inside of a circus tent. Parade artistically interprets and represents lowbrow and popular culture of the early 20th century. This topic reflected not just Cocteau's own dual interest, but also a growing interest among some artists in the activities of blue-collar French culture. Picasso, unlike Cocteau, was not born into privilege. His artistic ideas stem from a love of popular entertainment. Parade's decoration and costume designs demonstrate a mixture of styles, specifically of realism and cubism, as seen in the contrasted stylistic depiction of the ballet curtain, done in realistic style, and the cubist sets and costume only reveal once its curtain drawn. By juxtaposing styles, Picasso challenged his critics and audience to develop interpretations that were not necessarily tied to stylistic labels. Like Cocteau and Picasso, the choreographer of the ballet, Léonin Messiaen, was similarly torn between two identities. Although Messiaen's training consisted of intensive ballet lessons as well as acting, his passion remained closer to the art of drama. Messiaen turned to the art of pantomime to fulfill his vision of a ballet that calls for the union of the expressivity of the street and the elegance of the stage arts. By the time he wrote the music for Parade, Erik Satie was earning a living as a pianist at the Montmartre cabarets by night and composing sacred ballets and Gothic operas by day, making him a perfect choice for a project already filled with stylistic juxtapositions. John Sukko sheds light on Satie's lifestyle, which is full of what he terms, quote, deliciously ironic contradictions, end quote. Unsurprisingly, the lighthearted and humorous, witty aspect of Satie's nature speak the loudest to the public, as they became the essential components in how most critics and historians view his canonic work. According to this particular quote on the screen, as you can see, despite Freud's strong opposition, the historical connection between surrealism and psychoanalysis are unmistakable and well documented. Influences by Apollinaire André Breton, a French poet and trained physician, established himself as a leader of surrealism and published the first manifesto of surrealism in 1924, which I have the copy with me right here. Before the first translation of Sigmund Freud's theory of psychoanalysis from German to French in 1921, Breton actually learned about it in 1916 through another book by Emmanuel Cage's Précis de Psychiatrie. Reggie's summary gave the impression that psychoanalysis was a kind of self-help, a technique with no need for a doctor, inspiring Breton to develop and explore automatic techniques. Specifically, automatic writing. This was believed to reveal, as he called it, the depths of the mind. So what exactly is surrealism? According to Hone Pasukon, surrealists practice the act of abandoning consciousness, eschewing anything that, quote, could hinder the automatic spontaneous nature of thought, end quote. This assessment is reflected in the following definition of surrealism by Breton himself, which is being projected on the screen right now. Surrealists were also concerned with the interpretation of dreams, another principle inspired directly by Freud's interpretation of dream, which was published in 1899. We will now see how the violent context of World War I, coupled with the tenets and techniques of the surrealists, justify a psychological inspired approach to analyzing a multimedia work like Parade. The first surrealist method shared by all the media in Parade is tongue, or deceiving of the eye. In most cases, tongue relies on playing with perspective and dimensionality to create an illusion of realism. Surrealist painters adopt such skillful illusions to create a dreamlike atmosphere. So the second artistic tool that helps us analyze this ballet is automatic drawing. Recall Breton's automatic writing. The painter André Masson was the first to adapt the literary technique of automatic writing to another art form, as shown right here on the screen. This is Furious Sun by André Masson from 1925. The third visual element, visual art technique that helps analyze Parade is collage, which permeates the ballet and is essential to the process of interpreting the role of music within it. Lastly, a later method cultivated by Salvador Dali in the 1930s, which is Paranoiac Criticism, plays a significant role in how Parade can be interpreted surrealistically. The interpretive side of paranoiac critical methods allows multiple artistic interpretation of the work of others. More specifically, this interpretive approach creates the idea of double image that allows two alternate readings of the same apparent motive. And now we are approaching the last section of this paper, which is the central analysis of this ballet. The paradox at the heart of Parade lies in its ability to make its audience lose any sense of interior and the exterior. This sentiment is reflected in a text by Koto designed on a cord to be flashed before the spectators on the stage just before the final curtain. The drama, which didn't take place for those people who stay outside, was by these collaborators. The surrealist element in Satie, the surreal elements in Satie's score extends well beyond just creating an introspective mood. In some instances, his music is a direct response to the idea of his collaborators. His Prelude de Ridicule or the Prelude to the Red Curtain, for example, needs to be understood alongside Picasso's Curtain for the performance as it's engaged. The same processes of tone lay and framing. As you can see up here, this figure shows Picasso Ridicule or the Red Curtain, his largest canvas for the project, added nearly at the last minute. Because of this adjustment, Satie composed his Prelude to the Red Curtain, placing it right after the opening chorale when Picasso's curtain drops and appears majestically in front of the audience. The very idea of lowering a curtain at the start of the performance is, in itself, unusual. The illusory painting suggests numerous forms of reversal as well, not just the inner opposing to the outer, but also the reversal of the front and back stage. As you can see here, this is the curtain of this performance. So the audience is inside of the theater. So it creates such an illusion that they are actually seeing this performer resting in some kind of backstage scenario. So it's create a kind of illusion and confusion that way. The recapitulation of the prelude, however, as seen here in the red dot, the second red dot, is not the only musical frame. The entire ballet is constructed as a palindrome, as you can see with all these arrows. In this sense, the greatest illusion of all in Parade lies in the organization of the musical score in the form of a reflection or mirror effect. Parade within its frame became a self-sufficient piece of an artwork, which has the illusory quality of the inner and the outer self. The next sonic illusion is the collage, which we've been already talking about, which is achieved in conjunction with automatism. Koto proposed to Satie the idea of an acoustical illusion. Satie lists all the objects that he ended up using, including wood block, revolver shots, a shrill siren and a D siren, a typewriter, a lottery wheel, and a squishy puddles. The aforementioned objects create an oral collage. Due to their ready-made and indexical qualities of the sounds of these everyday objects connect to surrealist ideas about automatism, in which some sounds denote danger and can signify intense anxiety or perhaps a feeling of being out of place. The last sonic illusory technique found in Parade lies within the idea of stylistic illusion, an indirect reference to passing musical styles, much like Dali's double image. The interpretive biases would emerge through the audience's psychological obsessions, preoccupations, and more generally, pessimism from their inner beings. For example, one scholar claims that such subtle change in the little American girl scene, which is representing in the blue dot right here, coupled with the absence of Satie's characteristic bitonal mystification in the central section of the score marks, quote, so to speak, an American-style popular song for an American-style girl, end quote. Other scholars have noted the psychological implications of Satie's stylistic choices in this context. One of Satie's biographer, for example, points out that the steamboat ragtime in the very same tableau here slowly but subtly condemns, quote, our heroine to near disaster as the ship sinks in a swirl of string and winds preceded by mournful blast of its foghorn, end quote. According to this scholar, the classical stylistic elements in Petite Fille Américaine hint at psychological preoccupations beyond than just a reenactment of popular Hollywood film culture. In conclusion, my reading of Parade stands at odds with many current views of the composer, raising the possibility that Satie's music has been misunderstood. The simplicity of his composition, together with the parodical contents of his works, still dominate interpretations of his music. Such overgeneralizations about Satie's music can be harmful when one looks at how his style fits within broader artistic trends of the time. I have developed a new model for understanding how surrealism might work in music. Recognizing that surrealist music cannot be reduced to a list of concrete musical traits. Instead, surrealist music must be interpreted within the context of multimedia whole, making definition more versatile and applicable to specific circumstances. In Parade, all the media contribute equally to the emotional and psychological impact of the ballet. Surrealism in sound and music, therefore, cannot be defined apart from other facets of this multidisciplinary movement. Surrealism in music proved achievable through numerous methods, aiming to reveal subconscious turbulence by blurring the boundary between the outside and inside, a metaphor for conscious and subconscious, leading to a new discovery of higher and deeper truth. This work was not intended to be perceived as a form of social criticism or parody. The goal, rather, was to create a work that acted as a channel for self-exploration that helped achieve a state of higher reality, free from the ordinary worldly experiences of the functioning conscious mind. The major principle of surrealism, then, is Freud's ID to the art world, put forth during a wartime reality of unidentifiable psychiatric agitation and discomfort, coupled with alarming physical danger. The surrealists confronted that reality by turning inward toward a deeper truth. Thank you so much, and feel free to ask any question, and let's keep connected through all this platform. These are the quotation for all the resources for all the quotation I use in the slide. Any question?
Well, thank you so much for the presentation. As I listen to your presentation, I think of the interdisciplinary collaborations from psychology, arts, and music. So I have questions for you that what do you think of interdisciplinary collaborations in music can change now that we have passed through this psychological time during COVID-19?
Yeah, so especially this topic hit me really hard when COVID started to be spreading across the world.
Oops. We seem to have lost Ajahn Tanaporn connections. Please wait a moment for her to reconnect with us. Okay, here she is.
All right.
Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. It seemed like I got disconnected. So yeah, especially at this time with all these instabilities and the time of shortage of resources and extreme limitation of abundance, I think it's echoed the time of the World War, which this work was being created. And if Parade to be performed today, Parade was using the element of the lowbrow culture to create that shock value in the live performance. He has all this, the tightrope walker, or even the Chinese conjurer in this very prestigious ballet stage to create that shock value. Most people thought that it was just a mockery. The premiere of this particular ballet creates such a chaos, even worse than the Rite of Spring. Satie actually went to a court because one of the audience was, and the critics just attacked him very, very strongly. And because a lot of people thought that it was just a mockery, but instead, these people use all these provocative elements to really make people re-examine their psychological well-being. It's use it as a vessel for self-exploration. So now you can interpret this piece of art and also your psychological mind, and without any kind of self-constructed egos, social hierarchy, or especially that they've been so emphasized, the conscious mind, without the act of the conscious mind or any norms and moral of any given society. So all of that aimed to elevate the mankind for this very intangible but very intensely felt, I think, misery and the losing sense of control, I guess, in the time of global crisis. I think it's very relevant at this time, which is very interesting. I just finished this thesis around April, so right at this when COVID hit the world.
Thank you so much for the sharing, and
thank you.
I don't think there's any question left. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Our next presenter is Dr. Hiroko Nagai from Ateneo de Manila University on the topic of the making of remote collaborative performance of Koto music Strings of Hope.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is the last paper of this panel. I think everybody is getting tired, just sitting and listening to the papers. I think, so my paper is nothing complicated. I just wanted to share my own experience of music video production. So I just show, basically, I just showed 3 videos in my presentation. Wait. Okay, so my focus is this pandemic. I understand in Thailand, people's life actually went back to almost normal, but in the Philippines, we are still on lockdown. So pandemic is an everyday threat to our life. Then everybody agrees music was tremendously affected by this pandemic. So music consumption has become increasingly digital because people stay at home and watch online. How about music production? The production cannot hold performance in a public place, so musicians are searching for new ways to engage with listeners and viewers, as well as other musicians. Here, I'm a practitioner of Koto music. So Koto is a musical instrument of Japanese traditional music, which is called hogaku. In this panel, some speakers discussed what they call the folk music, traditional music. Then the one point what appeared in the questions is how traditions exist in the contemporary world. So hogaku is no exception. This is a contemporary tradition affected by globalization. So what's happening is that we have new compositions and improvisational performances. Some musicians tried a fusion with pop, rock, and jazz, and even classic orchestra music. And collaboration with Western and instruments from other Asian countries, increasing. So this one, so some hogaku schools put effort in promotion of their own music genres. So the learners outside Japan are certainly increasing. But so I may say this is the reality of Japanese traditional music. So this chart just showed the sales of number of traditional instruments, koto, shamisen, and taiko. So as you can see, the sales, a number of instruments sold quite quickly declining. So it indicates first, the decreasing popularity and market. The market is quite important because many people, hogaku musicians, should live on this market. Then what is particular to hogaku genre is this one, the shrinking availability of materials like ivory, water buffalo horns. These are items of trade ban. Then environmental pollution certainly affect the quality of wood. Actually, the koto instruments are more produced in China rather than in Japan. then Hogaku instrument makers, they are getting old. So aging of artisan is a serious issue. Then a conventional or traditional school system, Iemoto system, I don't know if you have heard this system, but it also has a good point, but the problem I see is it divides the cooperation of Hogaku musicians across the boundaries of genre, instrument, and even the school itself. Then around start of lockdown in March, so the Koto musicians communicated and exchanged our ideas, and so can Hogaku survive this pandemic? This was the pressing issue for us. So now what we did, we produced a music video using remote equipment, technology. Our goal was this one. Let's do something even on lockdown. So initially, our group included 13 Koto musicians in Australia, United States, Europe, and Southeast Asian countries. We intentionally did the network in 2018 because we have the common interest as the overseas Koto musicians. Then all of us belong to Sawai Koto Institute. So we chose a composition of, by Hikaru Sawai because it was pretty simple, we thought. Then actually nobody had the experience of video production and even remote performance at that time. So we just utilized simplest equipment, and then we didn't even know about editing. So we used cell phone, then just went ahead. So this is the first video we produced. This video was accepted in the community, whole community, pretty well, so that we proceeded to the second video project. And then this time our goal was to connect 100 Koto musicians in the world. So the 13 Koto musicians in Okoto became a Koto core group. They called our students to join this video production. Then we also invited our common teacher, Master Kazue Sawai. So that was the basic idea of this video. So we chose a composition by Tadao Sawai. This is also a piece for beginner. Then, so this time we expected more than 100 tracks, so we can't do the home editing. So we asked professional editors. The actual editing was done in Bangkok. But our recording equipment didn't improve. We used the cell phone mostly. But for this, we did a little bit of fundraising to pay to the editors. Then we came up with a simple mechanism to control individual performance due to different ability or levels of the players. So this is the second. I understand that our dean, Dr. De La Peña, showed this video in his keynote speech. I saw some issues here. The number one is, of course, the technology. In the beginning, we experienced a lack of experience in using remote session platforms. Only one member was using Zoom at that time. Therefore, we are not certain about audio latency and sound quality of these platforms. Then the limitations in technological capacity of individuals was also issue. Some members, some participants didn't know how to use some equipment. Then more practical sense, a poor recording environment is another issue. We have small rooms, then noises from neighborhood came in the sound, the family members are talking to the player. There are many funny stories about that. For the performance, as a performer, this is our concern more than technological issues. The one is lack of interplay, sense of the interplay between participants. You just follow the metronome and demo music, demo line, then just record it. Secondly, we had the issue of tempo. The first video, rigidity of tempo was an issue. A bit in the live performance, you can naturally adjust the listening to each other, but in the selfie-recording context, it couldn't do it. So it all depended on editing. In the second video, indeterminacy of tempo was the issue, because Japanese music has this Johaku style in which the tempos naturally increase toward the end. So the second piece, Hanaikada, started at a slower tempo, they gradually increase, and toward the end it becomes fast. So you couldn't use a metronome, so we asked Master Kaze-Sawai to record it first, so everybody, 100 participants followed her tempo. Then now we are thinking of the next, what is next? We don't want to do the same kind of project, so what can be the new in this Koto music production? Then from here, this is my own, my personal opinion and experience. I just look at this new piece, Longing for From Afar, composed by Dai Fujikawa. It was composed around April this year, around April, I think. What is particular about this composition is this is the open score for remote music performance. It was particularly composed for remote session. Then it can be played by any instrument or vocal style. As of now, there are already 8 videos, 8 productions by different groups. By the way, this score is downloadable, so it's open to the public, so everybody can download it. But for me and for my interest, it is quite interesting because it has a 4 levels of determinacy by composer, conductor, individual performance, and ensemble. So how the song can be is determined by the 4 levels, 4 actors. So these are productions, the same piece, using the same score. There is 2 shakuhachi videos, one by percussion group. The center is the Uta Symphony Orchestra. So what composer determined? There are 4 sections, 7 sections, I'm sorry. Then pitches and techniques you can use are fixed size. You can see section A, the solo melodies and the melody are fixed. Then mood of the piece was set as degard. Then composer specified seamless shift between sections. But what is more important is conductor's role. So conductor actually determine the form of the piece. So the performer can decide on the instrumental styles and vocal styles, the combination of pitches, and what kind of sound that they can use, and then even the insertion of solo melodies can be decided by the performers. The entire ensemble decide on the place of tutti melody because it should be played in unison. So I just show one of the Longing from Afar videos. It was made by choir, oboe, koto, with 3 conductors. Okay. So I looked at this piece because I wanted to get some ideas for our 3rd video production. Personally, I'm looking at the fullness of musicianship for this remote music project. But the group actually already discussed, and so far we agreed on the improvisation based on individual scales. Then another member suggested use of graphic score. So individual scale or tuning. The Koto instrument is basically modal, so everybody can make any kind of scale on it. So let's utilize it. Then graphic score or written storyboard can be used for the improvisation. Then I suggest to use our own experience of lockdown or this pandemic because it's something common among members. Then to fulfill the lack of the interplay, maybe we can use recorded sound and that guides the movement, so everybody can respond, react to that sound. What should be fixed is sections. Maybe we can utilize Johagyo traditional form with fixed tempo. Then maybe we can provide the simple, very simple 3-note melody so that individual scale will not go to the further range. So I think, the audience, people might expect what it would sound. So I just made a sample this week. I made 3 scales arbitrarily and recorded 3 parts separately. This is just a sample. So the project, the Strings of Hope, have been operated by the group that we operated collectively. So I would like to propose my ideas to the group, and then we proceed to the actual video production. So for the conclusion, for us Koto players, Strings of Hope is not a substitute of live performance, but a new side of musical community and music production. Certainly, it produced the connectedness in the period of isolation that then separated the Koto musicians psychologically and emotionally connected. Then, so this is also the side of collaborative performance that cannot be attained in the physical realities. Then it also served as networking of Koto practitioners. Then it can be used after the pandemic. Then, of course, so outreach to the wider audience in the internet. This is also a big item. So hopefully to help the promotion of Hogaku in general, then help the industry as a whole. But our honest feeling is we want to go back to the face-to-face performance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Now, I'd like to ask some questions in the team would like to ask some question. Ajahn Anotai, what is the challenges you face when playing in interdimensional music? I mean, in case of rhythm.
Okay. Adjustment of tempo.
Yes,
You
yes.
mean? Okay. So we made what you call the demo, kind of demo recording. Then we followed that tempo.
How about when you perform live with another musicians, remote places? How do you cope with that? Because you said on the third video production you aim to
Okay. I proposed the fixed tempo actually.
Yeah.
Or appoint one person to lead the ensemble with the fixed tempo. Either way.
Okay. Thank you. Also, in comparison with Dai Fujiwaka works, Longing from Afar, to be tele-performed, how do you compare this piece?
I think that the main difference is the existence of composer. So as much as possible, you don't want that. Actually, in the score, Fujikura stated the analogy of composer with the leaders of the country. So the leaders should take a good move to fight with this pandemic. So I think the composer actually thought of the conductor as leader of the ensemble. But since we ran the project collectively, the conductor or leader in the explicit way is not our agreement, I think.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, I have another question for you.
So may I join in as part of the discussions of the panels today? Thank you very, very much for all the presentations today, and it's really quite unusual to have like musicians and professionals from different fields sitting together with us. So we have performers, we have musicologist performers, we have also music students, and at the same time we have like composers, that you're working together very closely with the composers and musicians. So as the sessions today mentioned about the ideas of past and the present, what do you see that music after COVID would look like? And is the virtual real, or is these kind of virtuals going to stay with us? So what do you think?
Substitute for a while, but for the acoustical quality of music, live performance is always much better, but it's a really great substitute. And a lot of us as a musician and teacher, we have been implementing this, and it has been great, such a helpful method going forward.
Anybody else would like to add? Professor Hiroko, can you hear me?
We cannot hear. We cannot hear you.
Professor Hiroko, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, what do you think? Like, this kind of collaborative music that you made with the piece, do you think it's going to be possible if we hadn't had this COVID situation or not?
It's a good session, a good question. I think it didn't happen if the pandemic didn't happen. Yeah.
And do you think, like, for both Dr. Tanaporn and Dr. Hiroko, do you think that this kind of this type of music making will stay on after this?
I think so. You got a new tool, I think, new way to engage. So the possibilities remain. I'm quite sure.
Yes, because there's this discussion already since the first day of the symposium about whether is live music is something that cannot be missed out of from any kind of music making experience. And how do you think we as a musicians in the future, what kind of thing that we have to be aware in order to make a balance between this?
I think same thing with teaching, the way that a lot, if we try to resist the growing need and familiarity with the technology, the more we resist it, the less effective it's become for the upcoming generation. So the only way is to embrace it. It's like a really good balance. There's no way that we can teach or listen to classical music solely from technology, but it's a really good temporary substitute in the long run. Is kind of balance. But it will stay to really engage that new generation and.
So that we have one new generation musician sitting here with us as an undergraduate. So maybe, but before we are asking him some questions, may I propose some discussion about the music making, like looking from Satie's work, and if he had been living during this time period, what do you think he would have tried? Because this is not only like interdisciplinary arts, like from artists, but now there's this dimension of technology. So I'm asking this to both Dr. Tanaporn and Dr. Marie as well, that because you as a composer, Dr. Marie, what do you think, what kind of things that you would like to use as a tool for your future projects? And what do you think, Dr. Tanaporn, what kind of technologies that Erik Satie would wish to use?
So he was very, very ambitious, and he already explored all this technological things, and he wrote music for him, Surrealism, right after. He already incorporated all the everyday objects in his music, which got lost in today's world, and it's become the sound effect in music. So I think it's something that's always present. It's just how we look at it, just the routines and the perspective.
Yeah, in my opinion, also it's really a challenge for us composers or any form of art. But having this platform, I mean, it's very helpful, not only in local, but internationally. Somehow we can reach other people. Well, the symposium itself, this is the very first symposium I've attended, virtual, and it's a great experience connecting with other scholars and musicians, performers around the world. And this is something I think, I believe that this would still continue. But yeah, I just miss flying though, going to another place and seeing their beautiful place or country, right? But yeah, this is a good platform to me. For the meantime, I mean, we just have to enjoy, like what Ms. Tanaporn said. We have to engage to this one, and I'm still hoping that, although we don't know when, but yeah, face to face, because listening to actual live performances, wow, that's awesome. I mean, it cannot compare with this technology that we have.
And maybe since you, almost all of you has experienced this time through the COVID things. May I ask, for yourself as an artist, do you think that, is there anything that fundamentally changed with the way you work as a musicologist, as a composer, or as a performer?
So personally, I answer first. Well, I'm a composer, so as you know, the nature of our work is we're just in the room writing, right? But I'm also a performer. Like I play Banturia, so we have this University of the Philippines, Werndalia. Like we perform and not only giving concerts, but even reach out, educate to different places in the Philippines or even abroad. And I miss that. I miss that performing with them and rehearsal. It's more of the relationship that having them face to face. Yeah.
Would you like to add anything in? Maybe from a colleagues, Siravith or Supamongkol? Anything you'd like to add in terms of this virtual world that is approaching us?
Oops, muted.
I'm muted.
Yes, muted. Please unmute.
I'm afraid you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay, you're back with us. Please.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, I talk in the role of
I'm afraid it's real virtual at the moment. It's okay. We can come back to you later. But anything you'd like to add, Ajahn Puntwitt? Okay. So maybe in that case, we still can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I can add something.
Yeah, please.
The perspective from musicologists, I suffer from the limitation of resources. You can physically go to the library and search for stuff or somewhere to a really big library and really have that primary source. And now turn it out, I found ways that I can find alternative sources. My project might not be as I was intended it to be, but it's a new kind of discovery. It's like why someone digging to footnote or another footnote and footnote. But it's helped me as a scholar to look at things in a more practical way. Earlier, all those resources that were available were too different. It's a time of reflection.
So somehow the limitation actually create more opportunities, isn't it?
Maybe it's create more unique of a project.
And you can dig a bit deeper, in that sense. Okay. So I think we actually would like to see all the panelists joining together a little bit. So thank you very, very much for joining us today. For this afternoon. Thank you, Ajahn Puntwitt, for moderating this session so wonderfully, and thank you for all the questions of the audience who has asked us during this time. So for tomorrow, please stay tuned with the PGVIS International Symposium. We still have more keynote speakers for tomorrow and also for Sunday as well. So thank you very, very much again. Thank you, Ajahn Puntwitt.